This is the Empower Podcast, released July 11th, 2021, episode 549, Creative Engineering with Shrouk El-Attar. Welcome to the Amp Hour. I'm Chris Gamble of Contextual Electronics.
Hi, my name is Shrouk El-Attar. I go by she or they pronouns, and I am an electronic engineer by day, belly dancer by night, and 24/7 refugee. Nice to meet you.
Oh, nice to meet you too, Shrouk. I love following you online. Your Instagram is great, and your engineering stuff is so interesting too.
Thank you.
You talk about the refugee stuff as well. I mean, so you're originally from Egypt, correct?
Yes.
And you're now in the UK?
Yeah.
I mean, how does that impact your engineering experience? Did you go to school in Egypt, go to school in the UK? Where did your electronics background come from?
So I went to school in Egypt until I was 15, and then I came here. And then you have to do A-levels, which is sort of I don't know, do you call it secondary school in the US maybe?
I think that tracks. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I did that here in the UK, and then I wanted to apply and study engineering. But actually, being an asylum seeker meant that I couldn't access engineering for many, many, many years, for about 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's you're put in an impossible situation. You can't go to university, you can't work, you can't claim benefits, you can't leave the UK, you can't travel somewhere else
like
to
limbo.
try and study. Yeah, you can't study engineering, and we need to produce 186,000 engineers every single year.
They're not getting any younger out there, folks, right?
I'm just it does not make any economic sense at all. So I'm not sure if you know, actually, but I did a campaign called Equal Access to Higher Education for Asylum Seekers. Very snappy name, I know. With a charity called Student Action for Refugees. So I went and spoke in Parliament. I spoke to vice chancellors at universities. Wow. And right now we have equal access at more than 75 universities across the country, and we're winning more. So you can study engineering here if you are an asylum seeker now.
That's really great. Wow, that is very impressive. So
thanks.
Now you're fighting for the right to have that. It sounds like a lot of students are going to benefit from it. When you had the opportunity to start studying, I mean, what was your area of expertise? I read on your website too, it was like you're interested in TV at first, and then wanting to kind of see what was in the guts of the TV, right?
Yeah, so I remember actually, when I was younger, I used to watch my TV, and back in the 90s, they were huge, right? So I thought there was people living inside my TV, but there wasn't anybody. It was like electronics. But for me, that was just magic. That was real magic, and I got obsessed with electronics when I was younger. I used to take everything apart. I used to take my mum's mobile phone apart, which didn't make her very happy.
Right. That's great.
Yeah. How about you, Chris? How did you get into electronics?
Okay, so here's the thing I'm gonna say about Shrouk as well. So Shrouk also has a podcast where she interviews badass engineers. So I expected this to happen, where she's going to reverse interview me here as well. You know, actually taking phones apart was one of my first things.
Which phones did you take apart? Were they like the black and white ones?
It was Nokia brick phones and, early flip phones and stuff like that. So
yeah, I love that.
But the components were big enough to see, which is, probably, you think about kids taking apart phones today. What do you see?
Oh, you'll just see some black stickers and that's it.
Exactly. Right. You'll see something that looks like tiny flecks of color, which are maybe resistors or, the big capacitors on board. Yeah. But unless you're a kid with a screwdriver and a magnifying glass, what are you going to see these days? So yeah, it's
Do you remember when we could replace our batteries?
Right. Yeah. Those good old days. Yeah.
Do you remember when the battery used to last a whole week?
Yeah. Actually, so when I was on the show, I went to Chaos Communication Camp, right, which is out in Germany. And I got a burner phone when I was at one of the Saturn Electronics, is one of the stores out in Berlin. And I picked up a phone for €10. And it was the same old, it was that old thing. It was, a 10-euro phone. It's going to be old school technology and whatever, but it lasted a week, and it had all the classics on there, like Snake and
Wow. Oh,
and
Snake.
yeah.
Look, what was the other game that wasn't Snake? The one with the starships.
The star shapes, you said?
Starships?
Oh, stars. Oh,
Spaceships?
yeah. That was like Space Invaders is one, and then so that's like the one where like the little aliens are going to come down, and
Yeah, I
you
think
have
that's
to
the
shoot
one
them.
actually. Yeah, I loved
Yeah.
that.
And then Breakout's another common one where it's like the ball that's like kind of busting up bricks as it goes up.
Oh, I
So
don't remember that. Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I love that. Memory lane. So
Yeah.
how did you get like from there to the Amp Hour podcast?
Just standard electronics jobs.
Yeah.
And then 10 years ago now, there was a post on Reddit, and that's where it all started, So people can still go and find that post of someone like being like, hey, other electronics podcasts. And I tried it, and Dave heard it, and that's kind of where we got
Yeah.
to it. So yeah, there's still that history.
I'm just so sort of completely shocked by the lack of actual technical electronics podcasts out there.
Mm. Well, yeah, I think it's tough because it's a visual medium, right? I mean, it's like you think about when you are in school, when you are doing, that beginning stuff, it's such a visceral thing to need to like see, you talk about schematics, and, if you and I started talking about a schematic right now, it's like, oh, well, there's like a triangle, and then
Mm.
there's a line to another, to a squiggly or a small square. And it's just like, what,
And then it
that,
wouldn't make any.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's so hard to visualize. And then even if you do have that schematic right in front of you, that's then representing both the physical of, a SOIC package or whatever it is in the real world, but then also the functionality behind it. And just like, there's a lot of layers there. What was your experience as you were starting school? What was your, I mean, did you have like a physics background in high school as well? Like how was your early days?
Yeah, so what did I do? I did actually, so in Egypt, I did actually do an electronics module,
Mm-hmm.
and we built a radio, and I was like, wow, that's super fast. I had no idea what I was doing. I just
Mm-hmm.
know that it worked. I followed some instructions, and then it
Sure,
worked, and I
sure.
was like, whoa, that's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I came here, I found it's really hard to get started with electronics without having access to certain equipment. And
Mm-hmm.
back then I was an asylum seeker. I literally had £5 a day to live on, so I
Right.
couldn't even afford like an Arduino or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And when I got to university, it was really exciting because I suddenly had this money, but I also had access to like student societies and stuff. I don't know about you, but my university was really theoretical, and we didn't get to do a lot of the cool
Yeah.
electronics. You know what I thought
Right.
electronics was? We didn't get to do that sort of on university time. I'd have to get
Mm-hmm.
out of my way to do that. I'd have to get out of my way to go and work for a company. For example, I worked at
Mm-hmm.
Intel, I worked for some startups, and I worked at Fujitsu, all while studying. And that for me was really just the best way to get that excitement more than
Yes.
the books, if you know what I mean.
100%. Yeah, that totally tracks with my experience as well. I mean, and it's so tough because I think a lot of traditional universities are built like that, right? I mean, you think about the professors that are there are the ones who enjoyed the experience, and they continue that tradition, and they're doing research that is advancing probably some portion of the electronics space as well,
Yeah.
but that's not the main focus. And so the stuff that is that the basic level, Ohm's law and Maxwell's equations and everything, it's just, oh yeah, we just got to get through this stuff, and you'll get to the fun stuff later. And it's like, no, I want the I want the fun stuff now, and I need the fun stuff to keep me motivated. That's what I really think about. I mean, that's what,
Yeah,
like the
absolutely.
how do you keep people engaged, especially students that are coming
Mm.
from diverse backgrounds, and just like, and, maybe no experience. Like I didn't have high school experience, and like, so I was coming in pretty fresh, and I got lucky that I stuck with it, I think, and that
Same.
yeah, like that's kind of how I look at it.
I wish, I don't know if you have the same programs in the US, but in the UK, we have apprenticeship schemes
Oh, great.
where you get a degree as well, some of them. And I wish I knew about those before going to university, because that would have hands down been the best way for me to learn and keep that excitement, because you're
Yeah.
actually doing electronics, and you're saying, oh god, like I remember some of these some of these lectures, I think especially the ones about the comms modules,
Mm-hmm.
and it just sounds like alien
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
and then you actually do it and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I get
Right,
that now.
right,
Yeah.
right. And the actual, yeah, the application on a daily basis is way different than the theory. And the theory is important, but it's like important eventually, but they kind of front load it all. Kind of like, I don't know, I don't know what the UK universities as well. Like, are they trying to weed people out at the beginning in terms of like narrow down the program?
Oh, maybe. I honestly felt
Yeah,
like it was an experience of how much pressure can you cope with, rather than what's
yeah,
the
right.
easiest way you can learn this concept.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that sounds similar as well. Yeah, it may have been just like our perception as students, right? Like it's like everything. I was melodramatic. I was like, oh, no one's worked as hard as me, and in fact, I wasn't working that hard. But I think that from a motivation standpoint, I'm not sure. Like that motivation piece is so important. And like you mentioned too, I mean, like having access to an Arduino or similar, like as a student, to have that thing outside of class, that can really propel people forward, right? Seeing what you
Yeah.
can do with it.
Yeah.
So when you were in your early like internships, Intel and Fujitsu, you said, like, what was the kind of stuff you're doing there?
So actually at Intel, would that have been my first one? It would have been my second one. So my first one was working with surgeons operating on the eye, and I
Whoa.
had literally, seriously, yeah, that's how I felt. I literally had, 1 year of engineering university year under me, and I was like, oh, hello, why do you think I can do that?
Yeah, it is like a lot of trust, and it's like you feel good about that, but also like, oh my god.
Yeah, but I mean, I just right now I put myself forward for things that I might not be as confident about as I think. But back then, it took other people putting me forward for them, and
Mm-hmm.
I've learned a lot from that. If I have an interest in something, I'll put myself forward for it, even if
Mm.
I don't think that I can do it 100%, because I will learn to do it 100%. Three
Right.
months in.
Yep.
But with this, it was actually, once I simplified the problem, it became really simple to me, and I sort of compared it to a game I used to play. So basically, they needed to know how shaky the surgeon's hands are, how nervous they are, can they finish the operation in that sort of normal time or not. So all I needed to do is use the probe that they're already using, right? Add
Mm-hmm.
galvanic skin response, add accelerometer,
Yeah.
add time recording, and that's all I needed to do. It wasn't hard. It was just
I mean, I
daunting.
was I would think first year Chris would be like, I don't know any of those words you're saying, but yes, I think once you have that library, yeah, exactly. I mean, like, so what were you using as a reference point for that? I mean, did you already have expertise with the accelerometers and galvanic and similar?
No, it was the first time for me to use all of the above.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I used I can't I think I used like some really old PIC microchip as well, like a PIC
Uh huh.
16 or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just I don't know what people did before the internet. Like everything was there.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
that's
didn't
great.
have to deal, because it was for surgeons in training. It didn't have to be production, so I didn't have to do all
Uh,
the like IEC 60601
mm-hmm.
or like the
Yep.
FDA 510K or anything like that. It was just
Mm-hmm.
like, here's a thing, it works. Like, have fun. Bye,
Yeah.
surgeons.
Enjoy your data.
Enjoy your data.
By the way, Bill, you're really shaky and you should probably not be a surgeon.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's great.
You're a consultant, right? Most of your time when you're not doing a podcast,
That's right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you deal a lot with medical electronics.
Oh, very little actually.
Really?
Yeah, I think because there's some of it's regional, I think.
Mm.
I'm in the Midwest, and a lot of this there is medical here, no doubt, but like I usually focus on industrial if I can, just because I
Mm.
like that space. It's kind of older technology. There's a lot of room to build new things
Mm.
into it, a lot of IoT stuff.
Yeah.
And medical has, if you do, like you mentioned, right? If you get to production, there's so many restrictions and just overhead, and yeah,
Oh,
it's
trust me,
just
I'm pulling my hair out right now. It's
oh
all
yeah,
going
what kind of
white. All
stuff?
of my hair is going white. Well, I can't talk too much about the current work that
Okay,
I do.
okay.
But yeah, it's hard but exciting because
Mm.
working in consumer electronics, where you're a
Mm-hmm.
class 2 medical, so
Yeah.
you're not sort of the ones that will take 10 years to produce something.
Yeah.
So you're both in consumer electronics and a class 2 medical, so a lot of people sort of know the things that I work on. So when I say, oh, like, do you use the LV pump, a lot of people will instantly recognize what that is, and I really love that. I love that
Yeah.
so
That's
much.
great. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of documentation and certification, and
Yeah.
proving things are safe. But it's not as hard as I thought. Like, I just used to hear those big terms and be like, oh, medical electronics is scary.
Mm.
It's not.
Yeah.
It just takes you sort of knowing what to
Yeah.
do. I was also worried because it's a lot of RF technically, because everything I
Mm.
make has Bluetooth on it, everything is
Mm-hmm.
wearable, so there's a lot of battery management and stuff like that. But I mean, do the same PCB twice, basically, just
Mm-hmm.
change a few things. You don't have to be an RF guru, to make something
Yeah.
with an NRF on it.
Yeah, yeah, I've been noticing that as well. Like once you find a working design, you just don't touch the antenna section, and then
Just copy
we're good to
paste
go. Right, new
it.
sensors, new interfaces, stuff like that, and it's going to, it'll have a good shot at passing FCC or equivalent, and it's like that's a good start as well.
Exactly,
On
yeah.
on the regulation side, you said, I mean, like, is it kind of knowing where the pitfalls are, or is it just kind of sticking with it is the important part? I mean, like, what is the key to moving things forward in a medical space like that?
Honestly, from my experience, is read it properly.
Okay.
Really just know what you need to do, what you need to pass, and
Hmm.
then, submit your submission. I think a lot of people don't really read it properly, and I think that's where sort of you get the back and forth with the FDA or
Mm.
MHRA or whatever body you're trying to pass this with. I also learned I learned the hard way about like designing for testing some DFT. Sort of, I worked with something that had the antenna basically buried the other side of the PCB, so I'd have to
Mm.
literally drill into the
Mm.
product for the BNC
Uh-huh.
to be accessible, and that is not fun.
Yeah, that I guess you'll have limited number of units then too that are like drilled out, and
Yep.
it's tougher to like get stuff off the line then that might be accessible or whatever. So
Yeah, yeah. Have you had any issues like that?
a lot of the stuff that I've been doing has been less, more prototype kind of level stuff. So like
Yeah.
some, stuff moving into testing.
Even as a consultant?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, tell me
exactly.
more.
Like about the prototype or about the testing stuff.
Well, I guess about how most of the stuff you've been doing have been prototypes rather than, I guess,
Mm,
I guess that's still a product, but something that needs to pass
yeah,
regulations and stuff.
yeah. So like a lot of times, I'll be there for early prototype, or as I like to call it, the fun part, and then it'll get handed off to a manufacturer, and then I'll help guide it through some of the later certification stuff. But it's not like it'll go to a design group that might redesign parts of it to make it pass certification or to go to high volume or similar, right? So a lot of proof of concept type
Right.
stuff in those early
Wow.
days.
Oh, that sounds so much fun. That sounds like all the good stuff without all the bad stuff.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, and that's one thing that I kind of think about when you talk about this too. Like, it's like you think about a consumer product and like all the certifications, all the stuff. There's just a lot of paperwork there, right? There's a lot
Yeah.
of things that are like. If I think about my younger self, right, we're talking about student days as well. I thought like engineering was going to be like every day I designed something new, and it's like, well, 5% of my time. I don't know. What would you put your percentage at?
Oh, I'm just trying not to cry while thinking about the percentage.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I would say I'm doing, something that's definitely engineering related every day. It's just not always
Hmm.
design. Like,
Yeah.
it
Right.
could be especially at a startup as well, there's only a few of us to support all the electronic engineering for the
Hmm.
entire company. So we are doing the design, we are doing the firmware, we are doing the testing, we're designing the test, and we're doing the test, and also sort of, let's say there's a mechanical product, so there's no
Hmm.
electronics on it, but the equipment that tests that mechanical product will still be us. So we're doing lots of different things, which I would say 70% of the time is really fun. 30% of the time is not.
Yeah.
Especially,
Yeah,
I'm
exactly. Yeah.
talking especially about repeating the tests. Oh, not fun. Not fun.
Yeah. Right. Right. And so I think like I, as a consultant, I get to do a little bit more of maybe the fun early stuff. But then
Yeah.
the thing that I found too is like I'm trying to get more into firmware. And I find that the firmware stuff, because there's more revisions needed and more features that get to be added, I feel like with hardware specifically, it's like it's not one and done, but it's like if I'm doing things the best I possibly can, there should be very few revisions. And that means less design overall, right?
Mm.
Less tinkering with things, less trying things out. I mean, I'm guessing you're doing firmware as well, or do you have team
So
members that are
I'm
helping with
doing
that?
more hardware than firmware. There are some of the team
Mm-hmm.
members who are based completely from home, so it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense that they do most of the firmware.
Yep.
But I
Yep.
do a little bit too. So I know I from the podcast, I know that you use the NRF52s a lot, right?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Love them for hardware, hate them for firmware.
That's
Is
right.
that
That's right.
is that too hard?
No, I think that's right. I mean, like the NRF 52, the NRF 5 SDK is kind of it's a love hate thing, right? I mean, it's like you can get things up and going and demos going, but then it's like taking that production, making that more solidified. That's when, I'll go listen to Alicia and Chris over at Embedded FM talk about it too. And they, it's not like it's just us as hardware people being like, you know.
Yeah, no, I'm finding sort of the firmware side from that. So not like the tool chains are not super intuitive. But
Hmm.
once I get something working, I'm like, oh yeah, that's
Right.
amazing. But
Yep.
then
Yep.
but then you try and start something new, and it's like, oh no, which
Yeah.
linker
Yeah.
file do I need here?
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah. Exactly.
oh
Yeah.
no, don't look at the make files; they're awful.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been doing more Zephyr stuff as well lately, and that's been
What is Zephyr? Please educate me.
Zephyr's a real time operating system. Some of the Nordic people work on it, and basically
Okay.
it's like a layer above the NRF5 SDK. And so basically, it's when I think about like I was working with Bilal, who's a firmware engineer I was working with, who was doing a lot of that, but I got to learn from him as well. But I've also been doing some as well, and it's more like it's kind of almost close to Linux, where you're kind of patching stuff together
Mm.
versus necessarily writing a whole bunch of custom things. And
Mm.
so it's a little bit better, but it's got that then has its own challenges of, learning a real time operating system and just working within that. They feel like when you're using the Nordic stuff, there's this very well defined, it's like, oh, I'm using, a Segur J-Link, I'm
Yeah.
using Segur Embedded Studio, I'm using everything in this tool chain. I can go and Google for it. And there's a little bit less of that these days, it feels
Mm.
like. So, yeah, I don't know.
I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's tough no matter what, right? I mean, I'm sure you have to debug products. Well, you mentioned already, right? You have to debug drilling holes through plastic and and similar, right?
Oh, not my finest hour.
It happens though. So you mentioned the LV pump. You said you can't talk too much about the output, but I mean, working in this space. So LV it's a pump for breast milk. Is that right?
Yeah, so LV is a company that makes many products, including the LV pump.
Mm-hmm.
So LV is, I guess, would be in the femtech space. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people would describe femtech as technologies for women. I
Mm-hmm.
like to recognize my trans siblings out there. So I say technologies for cisgender women, transgender men, and some non
Mm-hmm.
binary people. Basically, anybody who gives birth, anybody who
Yeah.
breastfeeds, anybody with a vagina.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that I work in an engineering space where I can use these words,
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
because it's very much present in my personal life. And I've always felt this divide between my professional self going to work professional in quotation marks and then me, Shrouk the person. And it's
Mm-hmm.
been really nice to just be me day and
Yeah.
night. I love that so much. And I love that I work with people who have similar beliefs and shared values. And I've never been in an engineering office with so many women before. Like, you don't know what you miss out on until you experience it. And you're like, oh, is this what it's like? Oh, that's nice. Can
That's
we have
great.
more of that?
Yeah. I mean, how do we get to more? I mean, like, so, we talked a little bit before the show too. It's like, you know, women in engineering also have to like deal with like what's it like to be a woman in engineering? But it's like, how do we get to that more? I mean, like, what is there a magic formula about LV? Is it just the space? I mean, how do we get there, in your
Well,
opinion?
I guess LV is cheating because they are femtech, right?
Mhm.
All
I
the
mean,
women
maybe,
are.
but it sounds like a very interesting, space. As you know, I have a daughter, and my wife's breastfeeding, and so like I've been around these products as well, like portable breast pumps
Oh, how are you
and
finding them?
the portable ones. I mean, are I forget the one that we have. I should look up the one that we have here. Oh, it's a Willow. So it's a
A
Willow
willow?
pump.
Yeah, I've heard of the
Hmm.
willows. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the tech is very impressive. It
Yeah.
has to be super intuitive.
Yeah.
There's high sensitivity type of stuff. We also have a plug-in one from Spectre, and so I've also have experience with this. My sister actually runs a lactation clinic, so like I've
Oh,
also like
wow.
seen it from that side of things. And the Spectre is very simple. It's just like a plug-in. It's pretty standard. Just like it's just there's a diaphragm inside the pump heads, and so
Right.
like so it separates milk from air, and it's like that's very straight ahead. On
Wow.
the Willow, it's it's a very interesting peristaltic action, and
Mm.
just like yeah, I mean the technology in there seems pretty intense. So not to mention
Yeah.
it's cost constrained and high volume. So I'd imagine there's a lot of challenges there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the thing with the LV pump is we basically exploit piezoelectricity to achieve silent pumping. So it should be
Oh,
a lot
really?
quieter than the Willow. Yeah.
Uh huh.
So you can literally go to a meeting and pump at the same time and nobody will
Oh,
know that you're
wow.
pumping. Yeah, I love that
Right.
because it took what, like close to 200 years, 160 years, something like that, to come up with something that actually works for humans. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just upsetting, why did these people's needs not sort of get taken seriously
Mm-hmm.
before?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's just a lot of politics for me in it, and it's
Right.
really
Yeah.
amazing being part of that change that actually sees people as people and not just slap pink on something and say, oh yeah, there you go, that's for women now.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
there's also, I'm not sure if you know, but there is the pelvic floor trainers. So these are the two products
Oh.
I can talk about because they're
Okay.
out on the market, no NDAs
Okay.
here. And the LV trainer is basically a trainer that you put in your vagina, especially if you suffer from incontinence. So it
Mm-hmm.
trains your muscles, your pelvic floor muscles. And then you have things like less leakage, for example, or you could be
Yeah.
perfectly healthy but want a better sex life. So it trains those
Yeah. That's right.
muscles for those people too.
And not a customer of Goop, right? With the jade stones or whatever Gwyneth Paltrow is selling this week. It's yeah,
Oh,
it's an
what?
actual yeah. There's it's
Oh,
so
isn't that the actor?
yes,
Is that an actor?
yeah, she's an
I'm
actor,
so
and
sorry. I'm really not
yeah,
down with the kids, am I?
she has this lifestyle brand where basically she's trying to sell something that has a similar training methodology, but it's like they charge like $500 for these like
Oh,
jade
wow.
rocks that are just basically rocks that are put in there. It's insane. So
Oh,
I'm
no.
not a fan of hers. I mean, I'm a fan of making fun of it, but it's not as effective as something like this where it's an actual product that actually trains and helps. So that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
I heard she said that she brought yoga to the West or something.
Oh my
I'm like, have you heard of
that's
Indian people?
that's right. Exactly.
But yeah, what I
Well,
actually love about the LV trainer is there are millions of people, about 80 million people suffer from incontinence in
uh-huh.
the world. So
Yeah.
incontinence is when you can't control your bladder, and about
Hmm.
80% of people who give birth will suffer from incontinence.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
it's something that people don't discuss. It's a taboo. People don't
Hmm.
talk about it. So actually, people don't know that it's something that could happen to them until it does. So I'm
That's right.
making all of these really cool tech and also smashing through those taboos and human rights. And I'm just like having the time of my life right now.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think as the husband of someone who gave birth, it's just like it is there are so many things that are unspoken
Mm,
about the process, and it's yeah, I mean like just thinking about like so like my wife going back to work and thinking about like pumping during the day and things like that, and just thinking about so my very removed experience from all of that, but just thinking about women who I've worked with in the past who have had to do breast pumping milk, right? And just like thinking about that is this very important part of their day that then it's kind of relegated to like, in the worst case, some women are told like go pump in a bathroom, or like they're tethered to the wall or similar, and it's just like, because there's they have to be plugged in.
Honestly, they think women are cows.
Yeah.
Like dairy cows, I feel.
Right, exactly. And so so it sounds like the piezoelectric thing, it's silent, like you said. It can be,
Yeah.
discreet, it's non-invasive, but piezoelectric is very interesting in that way as well. Like, so
Yeah.
what is the actual like piezo action that's happening there? So it's like you're applying voltage to an element and it's like contracting, or how does that actually
Yeah.
work?
So it's actually like a small pump that just creates suction
Mm-hmm.
when you apply voltage to it. We don't make that specific part. We've got
Mm-hmm.
somebody else that makes it for us. But yeah, it's really cool stuff.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I mean the quiet nature of it too. Like that's really, really great.
Yeah, I've heard breast pumps. They are loud.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. You'd mentioned as well, so like these are connected as well. So then is there like a whole app ecosystem that's like integrated with this, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I don't actually work on the apps at all, but there is the
Mm-hmm.
software team works on the app. But yeah, all of the breast pumps and the pelvic floor trainers, the electronic ones, not the mechanical ones. So we have some mechanical products too. So completely passive pumping is there.
Mm-hmm.
Are connect to your phone if you want them to, but especially the pump works without connecting it to the phone either. But my team
Mm.
would be doing the firmware on the pump itself.
Got it. Got it. And then so basically, what were the things that were like actually interfacing to like the NRF52 or equivalent microcontroller? So basically, like monitoring the pump output, or is it like I/O, or what was actually being controlled from the phone and interfacing there?
I'm sure that's okay to talk about, isn't it? Because they're out. I'm sure
I mean,
that's
we don't have to
fine.
like give schematics or anything like that. I mostly like, is it like sensing, or is it more just kind of?
Yeah, so there's an MCU. It's actually not an NRF on the LV trader. It's an
Mm-hmm.
STM32, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There's pressure sensors, accelerometers, all that stuff. Really, obviously a UI. Yeah.
That's great.
Does that describe it?
Yeah, no, that's great. I guess with the trainer too, I'm not as
Yeah, the
familiar
trainer.
with like what that would like be, right?
Yeah, because so that's interesting because I thought so. I joined after the trainer's already been designed, and
Mm-hmm.
I assumed we'd be using sort of strain gauges, but we're using force sensitive resistors, which look like strain gauges but are not.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, do you know
Okay.
about those?
I'm not sure. Let's just go with no, and that way, even if I did know what it was, it'll help explain it to others.
I mean, it's really simple. It literally just connects to a microcontroller. It senses the force that's on it, and then it can translate it back to a game actually on your phone.
Okay, interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so basically, so women who are training with this inside of them, and basically like they're like told to like squeeze, and then this gives kind of like biofeedback effectively.
Yeah, so there's a few games that you play on the mobile app. I know because I do actually have a trainer, so I've used it. There's some of them sort of avoiding obstacles. Some of them you need to stay over a line.
Oh my!
Some of them are
It's like
like
Flappy Bird. It's like basically
yeah.
like.
Yes, the graphics are really cute too. They're
Yeah,
sort of
that's great.
nice vector graphics. Yeah,
Hmm.
check it out. Play a game with your vagina, everybody. Heard it here on Amp Hour Podcast.
That's right. That's interesting too. I mean, like I remember like that is an interesting control surface, right? Like as an alternative. I don't think it would be used in general, like outside of this quasi medical application, right? But like there are like alternative. I think there's accessibility type things like that, where basically you have, they show up like a controller, right? But like basically having different body movements or equivalent that would be able to control the input to a
Mm,
to a game, right?
mm. Yeah, I've
So.
seen not game, but I've seen technologies that uses people's eye movements if they can't use the rest of the
Hmm.
body,
Yeah.
and sometimes pressure from the mouth and stuff. It's really really creative. Lots of different ideas out there. That's what love seeing. That's the creativity that I think is missing from engineering, especially when you go and work sort of, not all corporate environments, but most corporate environments, you sort of get cornered and made to specialize in something, which works for a lot of people. It didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
For example, at my previous role, I worked on industrial robotics, and I got really good at designing hardware like for FPGAs, but that's
Mm-hmm.
all I could do basically because that was just my job. Here's a new FPGA, make some schematics,
Mm.
that go around it. I've barely done the VHDL itself for it, and I'd even have to, not all the time, but most of the time, I'd have to send it to like a PCB layout
Mm.
engineer who'd lay out my PCB for me. And I'm like, oh, like the many times where I'm like, these pins are not swappable, right? And then
Right,
you
right,
have to
yeah.
send it to somebody else. So you have to trust that they're going to read the notes, and then they
Uh-huh.
swap them. And you're like, if I
Yeah,
did my own PCB, that would have been so much easier for everybody
yeah.
involved. Thank you very much.
And so you're saying now at the new role, you are kind of, it seems like you said it's a smaller team, so you're kind of taking a more holistic design approach. Is that right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we do everything. All
That's
of
great.
us do everything, and that's a lot. It works a lot better for me. And specializing in something is not bad. It works for a lot of people too. But if we did have that creativity in engineering and encouraged it more, maybe it wouldn't have taken 160 years to come up with a breast pump that doesn't make
Hmm.
women feel like the dairy
Yeah.
cows.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's great too. I mean, so what are some of the other things that you've kind of been jumping into? What are some other technologies you're excited about trying out and you've been designing with?
Oh, Chris, I just made my own lab at home. This is what quarantine
Oh
does
yeah.
to
Oh great.
you. Yeah, so I'm starting a new show really soon. I've not told many people yet, but it's going to be called Shrookytronics, the Shrooky show about
Oh, I like
electronics.
that.
I
Yeah.
know, see
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
there?
Uh-huh.
And I think the first season is just going to be about sort of the equipment that I've got. So it's sponsored by RS Grassroots Education, which is part of RS Components. So I've got all of this really cool and mostly free equipment that I'm really
That's great.
excited,
Yeah.
yeah, to
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah.
That's what else I've been doing.
Well, I was just gonna say, like the five. I mean, like you mentioned, like getting started and like not having money as a student, but then like even as I remember, like as I started, I was in the same boat, and then I got my first job, and I started like having stuff at work. But then it's like thinking about building out a lab at home, and it's like, okay, but at that point, then what, right? Like where do you start? Where do you at prioritize? What
Mm,
should I buy a DMM or a power supply first? What is the bare minimum I need to get to the point of building stuff at home? And
yeah.
it's tough. It's tricky, right?
Yeah, so what would you prioritize first?
Well, I usually tell people is that if they can swing the dollar amount, I
Yeah.
usually push people right towards the analog discovery tube. I think that is the best starting one. It's like $250 to $300 from
Ooh.
Digilent. And I really like that it's portable and it's got a scope input and it's got a logic analyzer and power supplies and basically everything that someone might need to get started. It's not going to be like the be all end all, but like it's a lot of software input.
I'm completely lost. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, so so Analog Discovery 2 is like this tiny like brick that Digilent sells, and we've actually had Clint Cole, the former president, on the show like
Okay.
5 or 6, probably like 8 years ago now,
Oh.
and they have this program that
Mhm.
basically interfaces to it, and internally, like what you just used to design, it was an FPGA internally, and so they wrote all this software that basically reconfigures the FPGA and has like a software
Mm.
stack. And so there's some analog front ends in there for doing like oscilloscope style functions and power
Mm.
supply outputs that are adjustable. And it's just kind of a multi-tool. It's like a Swiss Army knife for
Mhm.
electronics. And it's not cheap, but it is very capable. There's a slightly cheaper version from Analog Devices, I believe. It's called the ADALM
Right.
2000, and that's like 150 to 200 depending where you are. So like those kind of multi tools, just at the beginning, I think those are the best. What do you usually recommend first?
I have an unpopular opinion, and I'm gonna break
Okay.
some hearts
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
I don't think that you need an oscilloscope. Boom.
Oh,
What do you
interesting. Okay.
think?
Mic drop. Don't drop your mic.
Oh, no,
I
no,
think
no.
I think, like it depends on what people want to do, but I think that is not too far off. I think that it depends like where people want to start with things, right? If they're, I think the first piece of gear probably should be something closer to like an Arduino and a bunch of LEDs. But it's like if people are then past that point already, then if they're saying like, oh, I actually want to get some test gear for whatever, then that's usually when I push them more towards.
So I'm talking about past that point, and I think
Okay.
I don't use an oscilloscope. I've got a logic analyzer. I don't use an oscilloscope that often. It's like when the signals are muddled on the logic analyzer, you can get your scope out. But
I think, Shrouk, you might just make better designs than I do, because usually what I need to find out is like, well, why is my serial bus or is my serial lines like they aren't doing anything? And then I look at it on a scope and I'm like, oh, look at that. I have the serial line going to 4 different pins and they're all pulled at different voltages. So
I love that.
I think your designs might just be better to start with.
No, I don't think so. But I do have a scope as well. It's one of the things that I think is important to have in a lab. But I think, if you're really super tight on budget, I don't think it needs to be the first thing you have. And I'm not talking sort of Arduino level at all. I'm talking if you want to have a proper, electronics lab and make PCBs, I think you can get by without an oscilloscope. What do you think about those picoscope things? I've not really used those before.
Those are also PC based, right? The picoscopes.
Yes, so you can plug them into your computer, and then your computer becomes an oscilloscope.
Yeah, I think they're okay. I mean, they're, you got to watch the specs. I think some of the ones that are like the very low end are like so low end that it's kind of like, why bother?
Yeah.
So as long as they can do 10 megahertz or so, that's probably enough for people that are getting started. And then, they can, and they do move up, right? The picoscopes move up into higher end stuff. And there's other USB, even like Tektronix and Keysight make like PC based scopes. Yeah. So I'm not against them. It's just that I don't have one. Do you have one on your bench?
No. I was offered one, and I was like, I'm a bit old school. Can I please have a benchtop oscilloscope? Thank you.
Yeah. I think it is limiting to have like a PC based thing, anything like that. But it's like, but then I think it comes down to like, if you're okay, if say you have a bench computer or a laptop with a bunch of screens, I feel like once you have more than one screen, then a PC based scope or tool is okay with me. When it's like, I have one screen that's my code and also scope trace and a logic analyzer and everything, and I have to like switch between them, like alt tab between them. That's when things get a little bit dicey. I think that's a great idea for a series. I think.
I'm just looking at my lab and I'm like, Sorry, what's a good idea for a series?
I think that the Trickytronics, that's a great idea for a series. I mean, where is that YouTube based or where people can go to find that?
I really need to break into YouTube, and I'm really scared of YouTube. There's too many videos there. But most of my stuff is on LinkedIn or Instagram. So on Instagram, I'm at Dancing Queer Official, because I am dancing and I am queer and I am official.
Yeah,
and on LinkedIn, it's Shrouk El-Attar, which you can have fun trying to spell.
We'll have links to all that, of course, later. How have you found, I mean, like, I feel like as well with like LinkedIn, I feel like is a very specific, like, pro crowd, like people that are at work and feeling okay browsing social. I've done that before, and I feel like it's that's great. It's been interesting. Instagram is interesting because it is so visual. I mean, do you find there's a lot of interest in electronics on Instagram?
Honestly, when I started Instagram, I only posted my belly dance stuff.
Okay. Yep.
So for those who don't know, I am a drag king belly dancer called Dancing Queer, as well as electronic engineer.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And most of my followers followed me for that reason. So it ties in a lot with the LGBT plus work that I do in Egypt.
Yeah, and you have a show about that as well, right? You have the couch. I forget what it was a name in Arabic, right?
Oh, how did you translate it?
No, I was watching one of your intro videos for it, and you had mentioned it's
Yeah,
couch in Arabic?
El-Kanaba, which means the sofa.
Afghan.
So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
a 12-part series plus that donations episode as well. So we've actually
That's
gained
great.
27,000 views, or a bit more than that. And it's a show by LGBT plus Arabs for LGBT plus Arabs, and it speaks positively in my own language in Arabic
Yeah.
about
That's
LGBT
great.
plus people, which is really rare. It shouldn't be rare, but whenever sort of I hear LGBT plus coverage in Arabic, it's almost always negative. So it's really
Mm.
nice to have that space.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. And
Yeah.
so then you're also now mixing in electronics with the Dancing Queer Official on Instagram as well, or
Yeah, yeah. So I have
interesting.
a bit of a mix of audience. So
No,
I
that's great though. I mean, like that because like I think about like thinking about like we talked at the beginning of the show about like being exposed to electronics, right? So like you'd mentioned the TV and or taking about cell phones. That was something similar as well. But like if people don't have access to that and have role models like you, like how do people get into it? I don't know. I
mm,
just think so much of it is luck. The fact that I found something that I enjoy as much as I do is I feel so lucky about it. And
absolutely.
and so like you're probably going to show someone who's watching it for belly dancing or similar, and then they're like, "Oh, wait a second, this is me. I could see myself doing this
And that
stuff."
is so important for me. Like I said, I really want to bring a lot more of that creativity into engineering. And I want actually to bring a lot of that engineering into the art world as well, because actually, I
Yeah, yeah,
think being an engineer makes me into a better artist, and being an
yeah.
artist makes me into a better engineer, and having ADHD makes me bad at everything. No, I think it could be great too, because like once you learn how to harness the power of ADHD, I think it could be something that's really powerful.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so I have seen a lot of engineers with like artistic bent. How do you think the engineering helps the art? I mean, in what way do you think there?
It really is just a way of thinking about things. And for me, so I'm working on my solo show this year, The Dancing Queer.
Hmm.
And I'm really excited about, because I make my belly dance costumes as well, and I'm really excited about incorporating electronics into that, and sort of having
Yeah,
that understanding, even if you're not doing it, I think makes much better art.
yeah, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, I mean, and so like, are you going to have like, I'm imagining LEDs or similar, or some kind of accelerometer you'd mentioned earlier, so something
Yeah,
like that.
and so I don't know if I should say now,
Yeah.
but something else too.
Okay. All right. That's awesome.
I don't know, maybe a belly dancing robot. I didn't say anything.
That's awesome. Wow. I mean, yeah, and like I think about the people that I've met or had on the show or similar, like there's a huge interest in the artistic world, of course. I mean, like people that are want to enhance their shows, or that we've had people on that help people build up their shows as well. Do you find people that then do want to like learn the electronics and do it themselves, or do you feel that kind of separation then?
In the art world,
Yeah.
I see a lot of people who are really interested in it in the art world, but think they can't do it. And this is
Uh,
why it's important for me to do those shows like Shrookitronics, like Badass Engineers, because I don't know if you've seen what the guests on my Badass Engineer series look like,
hmm.
but they look nothing like what I was taught an engineer looks like. And most of
Hmm.
them are doing work that I was not taught an engineer could do. And I just showing people representation is really
Hmm.
powerful, being like, hey, no, you can do it. If you're interested in it, that's enough.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, and so I think I've alluded to the badass engineers, but what is that show? So this is a series you did, is that right?
Yeah, so it's a series I did, also sponsored by RS Grassroots Education, that interviews, well, badass engineers, really. I've
Good,
interviewed,
well named. Yep, yep, yep.
yeah, not just a pretty face. I've interviewed a drag queen scientist, a robotic flight controller at the Canadian Space Agency, a rocket
Awesome.
scientist, but also,
Yeah.
showing people what they look like is really important
Hmm.
for me. So I will release it as podcast episodes as well, but having that video element for me was very
Hmm.
powerful.
Yeah. During last year, there was a lot of like representation in science and just showing that people of all backgrounds and creeds and everything like are scientists and working on cool stuff, and this is great to have this in the engineering space as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think it was Black in STEM was one of the
Ah,
hashtags that was happening that I was
yeah.
following.
I might have seen that actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, like that kind of stuff is, like you mentioned, it's really important to just show that, it's not this like monolith. I always kind of think of the, you watch Apollo 13 and like, the engineer with like the pocket protector and the thick black glasses and like the short sleeve shirt, and it's like they like looked super monolithic, and that has been the view of engineers for a long time, and
Yeah.
it's no longer like that, and it doesn't have to be like that, right?
You know
And
what though? Like I definitely want it to be diverse, but I always get a bit scared if that means we're gonna get paid less. So I don't know if you know that statistic, but
oh no, yeah.
yeah. So once a job becomes predominantly male, it gains prestige. The salaries
Ah.
are high. So a really good example is computer programmers. So they used to be primarily women, primarily black women actually.
Mm.
They used to be paid a fraction of sort of what we're paid today, and used to be
Hmm.
seen as a menial job. And the opposite happens as well. So people in so ticket offices, people who sold tickets and stuff like that, used to be predominantly men. They used to be paid a lot more. I think now the pay has dropped to about by 60% now
Hmm.
that there is more representation. And I'm like, oh, when there are women, are we going to get paid less?
That's interesting question. I don't know. I don't know what that would be. I think, you know, I think one thing that will be part, I mean, I think I see a huge need for like just more engineering
Mm,
overall, right? I mean, there's just so many problems out there to be solving. And I think that if there was, you'd mentioned what 160,000 people need to be trained each year to just to replace engineers, right?
mm,
So if it became 300,000, then, and there was more representation within that 300,000, then yeah, I could see that, like a supply demand kind of thing,
yeah.
maybe impacting pay. But I'd hope if it was just the 160,000 replacement, but it was much more representative of, actual demographics, then yeah, I sure as hell hope not, like, like that would be terrible.
I hope so. I hope so too.
Hmm. Well, I think that's something we gotta kind of keep vigilant for, and yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, so I'm very curious to actually, something I hear about from the consultants I know, kind of U.S. versus U.K. versus Eurozone in general, like just all over the world. It's interesting, in terms of pay, like
Mm.
just hearing about expectations and how things are different. And the UK was interesting because I've talked to some consultants over there too, and it is lower rates in general,
Is
and I'm
it
not sure if it's
lower
like,
than the US, is it?
yeah, it's much lower
Oh,
actually in
well,
terms
we've
of
got
just
free
like,
healthcare.
yeah, I mean that could be part of it, right? I mean, maybe it's baked into there or similar, but like I was surprised about that in terms of the kind of the expectation of how much a consultant could charge or
Yeah.
are charging actually.
Oh, I mean, I had no idea. I thought it'd be on par because
Yeah,
for
exactly. I would
me,
have thought the same. Yeah.
yeah, in the UK anyway, like consultants earn a lot more than people who just go to a salary job. So I just because they're earning a lot more, in my head they're like, oh yeah, they're rich, so they're rich everywhere. But I had no idea. I had no idea that it's different.
Yeah, I guess over here they're just extra rich, or if I meet any of them, I'll let you know.
Can we stay friends, please? How did you get into consultancy, Chris? Because you're doing a course about that soon, aren't you?
Yeah. I've been doing that 3 years now. I got into it because I was at a company where I was asked to do more marketing, and I wanted to do more technical stuff, and that's kind of
Yeah,
like I felt the technical stuff slipping away, and
yeah.
I would be up till 3 in the morning doing PCB design, and my wife's like, "Why aren't you?" I guess my then girlfriend, now wife, but like, she's like, "Why aren't you doing this full time? Why aren't you, why don't you want to do this?" And I was like, "I can. I have this other job." And she's like, "Well, you could quit that other job." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, that's actually a really good point." So
So you were staying up until 3 a.m. doing that for free, like for
that's right.
yourself,
Yeah, just for myself. Yep, yep.
right?
I mean, for the course or for also, yeah, yeah.
That must have been a huge decision, though, sort of quitting your stable income and taking a leap of faith, basically.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I had a support network, of course. I had a good job. I was able to save. I'm a long time saver, so like that kind of
I
stuff
need to
helps.
learn how to save.
Yeah.
I'm a big spender. I'm a big spender, Chris.
I, oh yeah. Okay. I mean, you got to design these. I mean, the belly dance robot that we didn't hear about. I mean,
No,
that's
no,
not
no, we
cheap
don't know
either. Yeah.
anything about that.
Yeah. Right. 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 Have you thought about going to consult? And just imagine, like, I mean, you're so passionate about all this stuff, and you could help lots of different companies do this kind of hardware design.
I have actually, and I keep on wondering if that's the thing for me, because it does have that A, sort of flexibility, B, you are doing design all the time. You're not doing so much of the stuff that, frankly, I think most engineers don't enjoy doing, like writing the documentation and getting the regulation and repeating the test 100 times.
Yeah.
But I always, I don't know if you've had that, but I always think, oh, am I good enough yet to do that?
I think that every single day, and I think that if that's your thought, it's almost universal, like the imposter syndrome. Like,
Mm,
there's so many people that I know who are in consulting that is very common, but it's just the thing I tell them, and I have to tell myself, is like, if not me, then who, right? And
mm,
sometimes it's like I have to go and learn something, on my own, or if the client is willing on their behalf. And it's like sometimes there's just problems that haven't been solved yet, and that
mm.
those are the best clients to have, that want you to go and find those things out.
Oh,
And
that's
you can
nice.
hear Alicia and Chris talking about that too on Embedded FM. They talk about, like, doing research like that, and it's frustrating and it's scary because you're taking someone's money for something that's not necessarily going to work out, research
Mm.
versus development.
Mm.
But from a personal perspective, I mean, I get to just learn so many things, and you sound like such a curious mind that I'm sure you would do so well at it.
Oh, really? Thanks. My boss loves this podcast, so I'm definitely not considering consultancy. Thank you.
No, no, no. This
No
is Shrouk's very
consultancy
happy.
for
Yeah,
Shrouk
right, right,
today.
right, right, right.
Maybe in
Well, I
the
think too.
30.
There's always this idea internally at companies too, like someone like yourself, like, that there's value in having, like, internal consultants as well, someone who can
Oh,
float from
really?
team to team and help to improve processes, or be like the paratrooper, the person that comes in and just solves the problem and moves to the next problem.
Oh,
Like, that's the other
that
kind of
sounds
best
very
case scenario.
ADHD friendly as well, can I just
Right,
say?
exactly, right.
So
Yeah.
how many different projects would you say you work on over 6 months?
Over 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the scope of things, right? I'd say over the past 6 months, it's been about probably five. I think five total.
Oh, wow, that's nice. So that's
Yeah.
5 different customers?
Yeah, exactly. Five different customers. Actually, sorry, like four customers, and like two projects are one of the biggest customers.
Right.
Yeah, and I think I feel like that's a good measure too of, like, if I'm doing well, then they ask me to come back, right? That's like the best
Yeah.
case scenario.
Yeah. And
But
where do you find customers? I'm not taking notes.
no, it's okay. I think networking, right? I mean, stuff that you're already great at, right? It's the thing I always talk about is being the second person, right? The
Hmm.
second person that they think of. Because if I hear about a job, and my buddy Dave hears about a job, my friend Rebecca hears about a job, and all these people hear about jobs, the number one person that you want to be is, like, on the tip of their tongue, right? So all these people are hearing about jobs all the time, and they may or may not be able to take them. But if they're not
Mm.
able to take them, then you want Shrouk to be the next person that's
Ah,
available, right?
looks
And
like those
and I
Instagram posts are coming in handy.
that's right, exactly, right. I mean, like, being visible and, like, saying that you're available. Those are just, like, really important things, I think.
Hmm.
For when people hear about things, that they know you're capable, right? They already see that with your design, and how well you're able to speak about electronics.
Mm.
And then it just becomes a introduction game, right? It's just how many people recommend Shrouk that is available and interested in trying out this job. And I feel like
Wow.
that's something that you would already be very good at. So
Well, thanks.
yeah.
And
But
do
you're
you,
not leaving your job, so it
I'm
doesn't matter
not.
right now,
No,
right?
of course. No,
Yeah, yeah.
please. I'm not leaving Dom. No, my boss really loves the Amp Hour. Actually,
Oh, that's great.
yeah. He might have been the one who suggested I listen to it.
Oh,
Maybe.
awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Dom. Yeah, yeah,
Thank you, Dom. We
yeah,
love you, Dom.
yeah,
I do actually
yeah,
love Dom. He's great.
yeah. That's great. And that's
he's
so important
obsessed with
too.
electronics. He's like doing electronics
Yeah.
on. I get like Slack messages on Saturday of like, look at the thing that I made.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
that's really cool.
Shrouk, what else should people know about? I mean, obviously you've got so many awesome things going on. I mean, between your work as a refugee, your belly dancing, your LGBT advocacy, all of these things, and then obviously on top of that, your engineering is just you've got a lot going on. But is there anything we missed here? Is there anything you're like, oh, I wish people knew blank about me?
I don't. Let me get my CV out. I do. I worry that that comes across as too scattered. Well, I guess it is because I do have ADHD. But I wonder, you know, when people hear this, are they like, oh, this person who's like all over the place, or this person who's doing all of these cool stuff? But yeah, I think we've covered all of the things. I have a
Yeah,
charity that
it's
helps
awesome.
LGBT plus people in Egypt. So actually, badass engineers raised a lot of money for my charity, which is Shrouk
Oh,
El-Attar Trust. And this year, we've been able to do things like provided food and shelter to 19 LGBT plus refugees who suffered from the
wow,
COVID crisis,
wow,
and we've helped a North African LGBT plus organization furnish their office, amongst other things. We do mental health support and stuff like that. So that's what your badass engineer support is doing. So thank you, people, for supporting
awesome.
that.
Yeah.
Also joined Helpful Engineering when the COVID crisis
Ah, yeah.
hit. I'm not sure if you know about Helpful Engineering.
I do from my friend Sophie, but just a little bit. Can you tell people what it is?
Yeah, so Helpful Engineering is an initiative. I don't know if they do just ventilators
Okay.
or general humanitarian engineering too, but it was basically an initiative that I joined to create COVID-19 ventilators. So I joined a team in Bristol here where I live, and we created this ventilator called Open Vent, which is completely open source. So I've had to learn your favorite KiCad.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, you can download you can clone the repo with all the KiCad shenanigans on it. Not my favorite thing to use, Chris. I
Yeah,
don't.
awesome. That's great. Is that what are you using, like Ultimate Work or some
Yes,
other
I use
package?
Ultimate Work. Sorry, I
Yeah.
think you might have misheard me. I said not my favorite thing to use. KiCad. So you use KiCad for your main work as well, right?
That's right. Yep. Yep.
How are you finding that? Because I found it like with Ultium, everything is so slick. It takes a long while to load. I hate that it
Mm-hmm.
takes a long while to
Yeah.
load,
Yeah.
but it's just slick. And with KiCad,
Mm.
it has that obviously open source feeling, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little different. Yeah. I think, it's one of those things where like you don't know what you're missing. And so I feel like the main thing and the main tripping point, I just interviewed one of the KiCad devs and we were talking about it a little bit.
Right.
I have to get that episode out still, but it was with John Evans. It's the library stuff is a mess. I'm sure that's part of your
Mm.
frustration, right? Because that's what Altium is quite good at. And
I found it quite buggy too, and I'm not sure if that
oh,
was just
really?
me, but especially when I created a new component, footprint or
Mm.
symbol, actually symbols if they're divided over multiple pages. So if the component is quite big and it's got like
Mm.
a
Oh,
ABC,
right, right. And you said FPGAs all the time too, so like
yeah,
that's yeah, that is an annoying part of it. Yeah, that's a good
yeah.
point.
So I had it a lot with the FPGA. I used an FPGA called Goin. Have you heard of that FPGA?
I don't think is that Chinese brand. Is that right?
Yeah, I had no
Yeah.
idea like about it. It's so cheap as well.
Is
But
it nice? I I've only heard one. I think one person has told me about it, so I don't think it's not common in my lexicon.
uh,
How big of a part are we talking here?
I can't remember how many pins, but it would have been hundreds of pins.
Okay, yeah.
So, but it
Was it
was
doing
multiple
like
pages.
logic routing, or was it actually doing like a internal was there like a RISC-V in there, or what was actually the FPGA for?
So it was just interacting the sensors.
Okay.
So I don't write the VHDL. I do the
hmm
hardware side of things, or
hmm
the Verilog. But yeah, just connected to a load of sensors. It was important that we used an FPGA because we needed to be able to read all the sensors pretty much at the same time because
Mm,
because of
yeah.
how important those readings are, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was a few cool things I learned. So I learned how to use the internal comparators of the FPGAs and sort of turn that into an ADC instead of having a separate ADC.
Oh,
That
cool.
was cool. But yeah, when
Yeah.
I created those symbols on KiCad, that like create a pin, and then the same pin would magically appear on one of the other.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about. I can send you a video maybe. If not, if I haven't made one, I know the problem you're talking about. Yeah,
Really?
it's very frustrating. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I'm excited about learning how to solve that. But I am a fan of open source programs, especially that, Altium is really expensive. If I didn't
Mhm.
work at a company, I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't be able to afford to buy it.
Mhm.
And making engineering accessible via open source programs like KiCad is really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, you had mentioned like we talked about at the beginning of like, the $5 Arduino might be kind of a stretch for some people at the beginning, but
Yeah.
like if there is a computer in hand, then, not having to pay extra for the software is very very helpful. I mean, computers are more than Arduinos, right? So,
Yeah, I'm wondering if I should do my Shrukitronics and KiCad for that reason, actually, or not.
well, we should talk after this because yeah,
Yeah.
I could help with that if you'd like. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and it is, I feel like the differential is always tough, right? The one thing I always heard about was people coming from Eagle and starting in KiCad. It's like, well, it's just so different. It's like, yeah, it is, like, but any, going the other direction, I would open up, a friend would send me an Eagle schematic to review, and I could at least go and look at it, but it's just like everything looks so different, and
Mm,
I didn't know where to do anything, or when I would do Altium stuff too, it's
mm,
just such a different mindset. So
mm,
sometimes I just try and gently remind people that every CAD program has its own quirks, and it's like you had mentioned, it takes a while to get used to any of them,
mm,
and it's
mm.
like, and then but then once you do, it's like, oh, okay, well, I know where the weirdness is. I'm just hopeful that V6 and KiCad will be a little bit less weird. That's what I'm really. We're just trying to go for slightly less weird over time, you know.
Well, I'm excited about learning how to fix my bugs, so thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. This sounds like a great project too. So one thing that I noticed with some of the vent teams too is like, I'd seen one or two other ventilator projects, and it's like just the lead time was so long because of the design and the validation of all this stuff. Did
Yeah.
it actually get out there? Are they actually being built?
So right now they are.
Yeah, that's great.
I had to sit down really with the team and just explain that the timelines were unrealistic.
Mm,
Everybody sort of wanted everything done now in 2 weeks. And there
yeah.
was also, because I find it a lot harder in a voluntary team to get things organized.
Hmm.
So there was sort of scattered Slack messages everywhere, and there wasn't, for a long time, it felt like there wasn't really a task list where the tasks were being captured. So you'd have to learn about sort of management systems on top of your engineering to be like, hello, can we
Hmm.
have a ticketing
Yeah. Right.
system? If you
Right.
need any more functionality added, I'm only going to look at this Excel spreadsheet here. If it's not captured in
Right.
that, it's not happening, basically.
Yep.
So that
Yep.
was really frustrating, but it was really nice working in a team of people that do want to do something that's good for the world.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that. I mean, I think that was especially at the beginning of the pandemic. Obviously, we're still in the midst of it. There's still lots of parts of the world that are dealing with it, and it's and Delta variants and all that other stuff that's coming up. But like, it felt like there wasn't. Everyone was just like looking for some kind of control, right? In terms of
Mm,
like I was just sitting in my house. I just wanted to do something, and like teams like this,
mm.
you guys are actually like pushing forward with it, and it's really great that there was some action in there.
But it also, it took the MHRA and other bodies to. So in the UK, we had an
Hmm.
exemption. We didn't have to basically fit every single regulation. Only a
Mm,
very very few. So it made timelines a bit easier.
yeah, and the MHRA is similar to like the FDA. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Mm, yeah. Well, that's great. And so are there ones out actually in the field with this, or they're still to come?
I think there's still to come, but I can get some more information for you. But I don't
Sure.
think
Yeah.
we're gonna have to wait much longer.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I think that the focus, a lot of the ones that I saw as well were like focusing on like low cost areas, because they were not just serving like, the peak needs that happened at least in the States, or maybe in the UK as well, but it was like also like, look, some parts of the world just don't have anything. There's
Yeah.
not like they have 20 ventilators and they need 30. It's like, no, there's 0 ventilators and they need more than 0. And so it's like, but also like the costs were prohibitive for that sort of thing.
And ventilators are very relevant now because of COVID, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
just a COVID problem.
Right. Exactly. Right.
So yeah, even if it's past the peak, even for other places, it's still useful.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are places that literally have no vaccination program. There are countries that are still crippled with COVID completely.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Well, that's a great project to be working on for sure.
Thanks.
Shrouk, where can people find out more about you? Have you come speak at their event if they're interested? I mean,
Yeah, so I have been a speaker for 8 years now. You can book me to come and
awesome.
give a talk. You can get in touch with my agent, which is all on my website, shro.uk. See what I did there?
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really great great domain. So
yeah, my email is shrouk@shro.uk.
it's awesome.
It's hard to say on a phone or something and be like, look, it's really clever. Honestly, just look at it. Just write it down. It's clever.
Right. You'll see it.
Yeah, and my Instagram and LinkedIn and all that is on my website as well. So yeah, please get in touch.
Yeah. Shrouk, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciated, getting to know more about you and your career, and I can't wait to see what you're doing next. So please keep in touch.
Same. I'm really excited about seeing what you'll do next too, even though you've already done an incredible amount of stuff.
Thanks. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye. Ma'a salama.